broad sense, our meditation practice and our intentions around the building and maintaining of companionship and connections with each other, we try to remain aware of all of the stages of life and the circumstances which we encounter, sometimes skillfully, sometimes not, and sometimes with great fortune, and other times in a context of tragedy. So I wondered, Bill, if you could say something about the message that you got this morning.
As many of you know, we were traveling last month with two other couples, and as well as Dora's sister. And just last night, in the middle of the night, we got a phone call to say that our friend Henry Goals, who we traveled with, died in a climbing accident, fell yesterday in Rocky Mountain National Park, and very suddenly died. And his wife, Jan Engert, was with her parents in Idaho. Her father is in the process. He has terminal cancer, and her mother has dementia. So these kinds of things just come up suddenly. And sometimes you find out at a time when you're prepared to find out, and sometimes you don't. But Henry was a very vibrant, outdoorsy type, and over time we'd come to know him, and he had opened and deepened, become a good example of somebody whose heart opens and warms as life unfolds. And so Dora and I are holding Jan and Henry in our hearts today. So I think, is there anything else you would say?
Just want to add, he was a scientist, and he was a grandfather, and had those many dimensions. And both Jan and Henry were just this at this time retiring and looking forward to a nice life together. They met late in life, so everyone has their story, and all of us, it's just such a wake up that overnight our fortunes that look one way can flip to another way. And that's such a great reminder for why we should practice and look at the deeper situation, and be able to see through this illusion of permanence and expectation. So it's great to be practicing with everyone today.
back in the early to mid 1970s, when Kala Rinpoche was traveling in North America and establishing Dharma centers. There was a center in San Francisco that he established, as well as, of course, the one in Portland. And at that time, there was a profound dearth or a rarity in terms of good translations. It was more like any translation was better than none, and mostly there weren't translations. And so the practices were more difficult than now. Or you could say, so difficult that they were easy. In a certain odd way, you just sort of gave up sometimes. And at that time, we approached Kala Rinpoche on a visit, which was probably 1976, 7, I can't remember, and asked him to help us with the practice of Chenrezig, which was, despite the fact that some may consider it a relatively easy practice today, it was completely daunting at the time. So if you feel daunted by the practice, then you must be a member of this lineage, I think. But he spent some time with us outlining things that were very pertinent to the practice, but not all of them officially part of the actual practice. Now, those things were captured, and so I looked them up. Amazing even that I could find that those meetings, and that somebody had actually typed them up. And I know who typed them up, but I'm not going to mention their names today, but I'm grateful for the work that they did. So, since there was no text prepared, the only text was a woodblock print in Tibetan only, and none of us had the chops to work with that in a meaningful way. And so he went through some things, and I thought this morning it might be nice to go through the practice as he laid it out without the text. And mostly, as I recall, I'm not really sure that he meant it to be a practice as he explained it, as much as just an explanation that we might use later to engage in the practice. So all of that is projection, is the truth at this point. But nonetheless, I wanted to go through it because I hadn't read it since the mid-70s. And so it was an inspiration to read it. Outside of the text itself, it was so interesting to see those things. So I'm going to go through this. It's only a page and a half, which I'm not going to hand out because at this time, because there's typos and things in it that feel like it's not quite ready for that. And I know if I asked you to give it back, you wouldn't. And so I wouldn't. So this is how it goes. And maybe along the way, we could engage in the practice a little bit as he talked about it. So he says, begin with refuge in the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I actually wrote the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. He said, the translator, we had a good translator to translate his words, but when he said the three jewels, most of us didn't even know what the three jewels were. Or we had a slight idea somehow and wondered why they were called jewels and those sorts of things. So he said, begin with refuge in the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So let's begin with that and just recite the refuge and bodhicitta prayer from the text as we did earlier this morning.
Until the
Summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. So earlier this morning I said breathe life into the aspiration to attain enlightenment. So that was part of this document. On behalf of all beings, with whom you have had and continue to have negative and positive connections with, hold a strong intention to become a cause for the end of confusion and suffering in this illusory world we call samsara. Then, from him again, imagine that all confused sentient beings, so he's not just saying just the confused ones. By definition, a sentient being is confused in this world, or they're enlightened and not confused. There's just two categories. So, and unfortunately, you don't get to pick. So, imagine that all confused sentient beings are present in front of you. Those of you who know the practice of Chenrezig will see how this is a radically condensed version, but maybe very helpful in some cases. So hold a strong intention to become the cause of the end of confusion and suffering in this illusory world we call samsara. Imagine that all confused sentient beings are present in front of you. So we could add to that, what we also know is that those confused beings are numberless. They are like infinite in number, uncountable, and they extend to the very limits of space itself, like an oceanic cloud of these confused beings. So we imagine on the crown of the heads of each is a white flowering lotus upon which rests a flat moon disk. It's like the moon, of course, this is my commentary on it, it's like the moon in the sky, but it is not a sphere, it is a flat disk, but it is also not two-dimensional. It has a very slight three-dimensional appearance, like a disk would be if you held it in your hand. It would be three-dimensional. On this disk appears a white Hree. So in the normal text that we use now, there's a little bit of ritual around generating that Hree. He just put it there, like on the disk appears a white Hree, which is a Tibetan letter, which we call a seed syllable, and not to go into it at this very moment. That white Hree sitting on the moon disk, then, he says, rays of white, blue, yellow, red, and green light. Then I say, colors of the 5 Buddha families. He did not say that, but that's what they are. Of the 5 Buddha families, radiate from the Hree. So that Hree on a flat moon disk, and that moon disk is sitting on that open lotus flower on the crown of your head, and the Hree is on that disk. Again, he did not include the ritual that we now use to generate that Hree. So again, rays of white, blue, yellow, red, green light, colors of the 5 Buddha families radiate from the Hree. In all directions, those colors radiate. The lights are an offering to the Buddhas. So those 5 colored lights are an offering to the Buddhas and fill the entire universe of what we know and don't know. Imagine this. The light returns from the Buddha realms, even stronger than before, imbued with blessings which are even more powerful than before. The light is absorbed into the Hree, which is recalling where it came from, and now it's absorbed back into the Hree, which is instantly transformed into Chenrezig. So at that point, we just see that Chenrezig appears on the crown of our head, fully formed. Chenrezig's, now back to the text, Chenrezig's body is noble and perfect. His body is radiantly white, emanating or radiating, whichever you wish, primarily white light, somewhat mixed with blue, yellow, red, and green light. The somewhat is my addition because I don't know what else to call it. Mixed, it's not actually mixed in a certain way. The lights are all there, so you see all 5 colors of them. His face is beautiful and smiling. His radiant and compassionate eyes are gazing down on sentient beings. He has 4 hands. 1 pair is folded at his breast, like this, in deep meditation and prayer. Regarding the 2nd pair, the outer right hand, that would be this one, holds a crystal mala, a rosary, a crystal rosary or mala, and the left, a white lotus. So there's a white lotus in his left hand and the mala in the right hand. He is wearing beautiful silks and is adorned with precious and semi-precious jewels and ornaments. A deer skin is draped over his shoulder. I note here also that there was mention of, in some situations, the deer skin is replaced with an antelope skin. So those two animals share the thing that's important here. On the crown of Chenrezig's head is Amitabha Buddha, who is red in color, known as the Buddha of boundless light. His feet are in the Vajra position, which is crossed, in the lotus position. Behind Chenrezig is a perfect vertical full moon disc. It appears like a support for Chenrezig's back. So, of course, it doesn't actually support Chenrezig's back, but it appears in that way. In other words, kind of vertical as opposed to flat. Now consider the very important symbolism and the associated meanings. These things are things which many of you may never have heard now or forgotten. While there are many levels to be considered as we mature in the practice, beginners and experienced practitioners alike must allow for the fact that it can be and likely will take a long time to absorb, embody, and deeply experience the richness of this practice. This definitely points to the necessity of what we call the paramita, or perfection of patience. Patience with ourselves, in this case, is what it's pointing to. Patience for the long term, not the short term. Kala Rinpoche was somewhat famous for mentioning this particular piece. His body, Chenrezig's, is entirely translucent white because he is entirely pure. That's the symbolism. He does not suffer from mental poisons like jealousy, greed, and pride, and the rest, or habitual patterns of thought and behavior. That's an interesting one. He does not suffer from from the poisons of habitual patterns of thought and behavior. The hot emotional states of desire, aversion, anger, etc. have all cooled down. His single face is also rich with meaning, such as the experiential understanding of the self as utterly empty, and the deep, direct understanding or single taste of all phenomena and experience. So that's how we describe the single face of most of the deities, including Chenrezig. Alternatively, we can say that no thing has any inherent nature. So note, it's not saying nothing has inherent nature. He's saying no thing has inherent nature. For most of we ordinary beings, these teachings rank a status as profound propositions. But for Chenrezig, they are direct experience, not mere propositions. He's not saying it, and he doesn't say it in this particular case, but he will say it future, though it's not written down many times, that we all are inherently Chenrezig. We all are the nature of Buddhahood itself. We don't recognize it, and that's what distinguishes us from Buddhas. So no thing has inherent nature. His forearms are also important. His right outer arm, so he's got forearms, so there's an outer arm, which the right one is the one that extends out. His right outer arm represents loving kindness. His right inner arm, which is held, the palm is held in the mudra, symbol of meditation and prayer. So his right inner arm represents compassion. His left inner arm, which is also held in prayer, represents sympathetic joy. The left outer arm represents equanimity. That one we should talk about later today, because it's the key to the entire practice. Like the lotus flower, which is unsullied by the mud from which it arises, in the same manner, Chenrezig is untouched by the dirt and confusion of samsara. The crystal mala is a sign that he is praying for all sentient beings, as are the folded hands. So the folded hands are also a sign of that. The silken garments show that he has all riches, real and imagined. Therefore, he wants nothing. So, and this phrase is mine now, so the saying goes, he can only give. Having everything, there's nothing to take. He can only give. They are also a sign of the Sambhogakaya, so that's an element within the Vajrayana, which we could talk about this afternoon, but not right this moment. The 5 jewels in his crown symbolize that the 5 mind poisons have become the 5 wisdoms. And the deerskin symbolizes his total nonviolence, because the deer is such a gentle animal. Sometimes an antelope skin is referenced instead of a deer, so that's where he actually put it. The Buddha Amitabha, red in color. He doesn't mention it's red in color, but it is. On Chenrezig's head, right, sitting above his head, actually kind of floating above his head slightly. So the Buddha Amitabha on Chenrezig's head, the Buddha Amitabha is on Chenrezig's head because he is Chenrezig's root lama or guru. So Amitabha is Chenrezig's exalted teacher. In the past, present, and future, they are together. That's how it was said. In other words, they have never been apart. They have always been connected. Chenrezig's left leg, continuing with the symbolism, symbolizes wisdom. His right leg symbolizes skillful means and compassion. Now, we repeat the homage to Chenrezig. So this is actually my writing now. So I just made a note to myself, since it is an especially important part of the Chenrezig practice, I will not include a paraphrased or condensed explanation. So we should go now and recite the homage to Chenrezig from the text. Oh, there it is. Oh, there we go. Okay, I see. Okay, on page 15, in English, the English there is Noble One, referring to Chenrezig, untainted by the mire, your form is luminous white. A perfect awakened one adorns your head. With the eyes of compassion, you gaze upon beings. To Chenrezig we bow. So do it 3 times. Noble one, untainted by the mire, your form is luminous white. A perfect awakened one adorns your head. With the eyes of compassion you gaze upon beings. To Chenrezig we bow. Noble one, untainted by the mire, your form is luminous white. A perfect awakened one adorns your head. With the eyes of compassion you gaze upon beings. To Chenrezig we bow. Those of you who are familiar with the practice of Chenrezig, then you'll see what's included and what he skipped in this. Since it is an especially, that's what I said before, included here, make the promise clear. Now, what follows is a condensed description of what follows the homage. Imagine that rays of light in the 5 colors, again, white, red, green, blue, yellow, emanate from Chenrezig's body throughout the entire universe. So we imagine that light literally fills the entire universe. All impure karma is purified and experienced as an illusion. So that's all of the sentient beings that we imagine filling all of space. They are struck by that light and their experience is changed so that all impure karma is purified and experienced as an illusion. Through the blessings of this light, the whole outer world becomes like Amitabha's Pure Land. The body, speech, and mind of ourselves and all sentient beings dissolve into Chenrezig's body, speech, and mind. So we imagine that our body, speech, and mind dissolve into Chenrezig's. All form is that of Chenrezig. So we imagine that all form appearances we think of as the form of Chenrezig, but literally Chenrezig, not just the form of Chenrezig, like it is the form of Chenrezig, it's the presence of Chenrezig. All form is that of Chenrezig. All sound is mantra. Thought becomes wisdom, and one's mind becomes spontaneous wisdom. And now the instruction is, repeat the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra for at least 1 mala. So, can you do it? Great.
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum,
Sure.
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum,
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum.
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum,
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Now we continue to imagine that we are Chenrezig, which means our bodies are white, translucent, and all the other features also the same. In our heart is a white lotus. So that means not in the physical heart, but the heart place, kind of the center of the chest, equidistant from the front and back of our bodies. There is a white lotus on which rests a moon disk with a white Hri. So once again, back to that place, but now it is in our own heart place. Rays of light in the 5 colors emanate from the Hri. They pass out into the whole universe, making everything clearly appear as empty. The rays then return. Our body dissolves into emptiness. Those of you who are familiar with this will recognize that it is something of a shortcut here. The Hri is the only thing remaining, and that also disappears or dissolves. Ideally, we are now in the deep experience of meditation on emptiness. That's where we're meant to come to at that point. Now, my words here. Ideally, we stay there as long as possible. A few seconds to a maximum of perhaps 1 minute is usually best. It's important to finish before being distracted. In other words, if your meditation is very stable, you might sit there for much longer, and if it's not even 1 second, better to stop before being distracted. Then, before that state completely dissolves into distraction, return to the space of meditation as Chenrezig in essence. In other words, we think of ourselves as Chenrezig in essence. Then, through the method of the dedication, which is coming, share the benefit with all sentient beings. So, let's go to the dedication. What's that page for that?
Page 35.
35.
35.
35. All right. Okay. Okay. Beginning on 35. It's just that one page. Through the merit of reciting and meditating, may I and every being to whom I am connected, as soon as these impure forms are left behind, be miraculously born in Dewa Chen. Okay, that's the end of that little short but sweet document. How's our time doing? So I think maybe we could take another little short stretch. Even 5 or 10 minutes if you need, and then we'll come back and we'll go through the practice of Chenrezig in the way that we ordinarily do it.